Long ago, there was a witch who lived in a shack deep in the woods. Her name was Mary Worth, and villagers came to her for tinctures and potions when they were sick. However, they started to get wary when young girls started to go missing. She denied any involvement, but it seemed as though the more girls went missing, the younger she looked. One night, a young girl had taken a tincture from Mary Worth for her toothache. However, her parents heard a strange sound outside and found Mary using her wand to what seemed to be suck the life out of this young girl. The villagers rioted and they took Mary Worth and burned her alive. They burned her in front of a mirror so she could see herself die, but before she died, she cursed the mirror and said if anyone were to ever say her name 3 times in front of a mirror, her spirit would return for revenge. Fast forward over 1,000 years, the legend of Bloody Mary is nothing more than a party game. A young girl is dared by her friends to go into the bathroom and she says, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." And there she was. He took her soul and tore her to shreds, burned her soul, and trapped her in the mirror for all eternity.
My brother recently moved in with us with his wife and 2 children. My husband and I own a big house on a farm, and with everyone working from home, we thought it would be a good chance to stay together as a family. I have 3 children, my eldest being 18 and my youngest being 13. It was amazing. Everyone got along just great. My sister-in-law and son especially got along together. They would always go running. Everything seemed normal until last month when my sister-in-law and son went on their run, but I was baking and I never saw them make any rounds around the farm, which was weird. I asked about it and they said they decided to hit the road. I thought nothing of it and everything seemed normal. They both have a really good bond. Yesterday I was coming from a friend's house early in the morning and the sun wasn't up yet and it was a little dark, but I saw that the cabin we have at the farm was open and the light was on. I thought maybe one of the employees had forgotten to lock it up, so I went to close the door and switch off the lights and I got closer and I heard something. I took a peek and I saw my son and sister-in-law going at it. I didn't confront them because I was in shock. I still haven't told anyone what I saw and I don't know what to do. Should I confront them? Should I tell my brother? Should I tell my husband? I'm so confused. Due to their close relationship, I feel like this has been going on for a while. After much thought, I decided to tell my husband and proceed from there. My husband lost it. At first he thought it was a joke, and we talked about the issue and we decided we should first talk to our son before telling my brother. My son confessed to everything and said they started sleeping together last February when he was 17. My son said it started on sister-in-law's birthday party that they attended and they got drunk and slept in the bathroom and have been meeting at hotels ever since and sneaking off at family gatherings. After my son's confession, my husband just lost it and told my son to leave the house and go to our condo in town and he didn't want to see him for the time. When my son was gone, my husband stormed into my brother's room and told him everything. My brother lost it and packed his stuff, took the kids and left. He asked where my son was because he wanted to teach him a lesson. We didn't tell him and he eventually left. My sister-in-law wasn't home when we told him and she hasn't returned since. In all the screaming and shouting, my daughters heard everything and are now devastated that their family might be ruined and they miss their brother and they're afraid my husband won't ever let him in the house again. My brother won't answer my calls or text messages. My husband says I should give him time to heal. My son has left the condo because he's afraid of what my brother will do to him and he is now hiding at a friend's house and he won't tell us which friend. No word on sister-in-law either.
Storytime about the time that I was kidnapped. I would just like to add in an extreme trigger warning. So a little background information. I was 16 at the time, and my 2 friends invited me to a birthday party. It was this girl and her boyfriend. They said that it was in the south side and not a lot of people were going to be there. So we go to the guy's house who's throwing the party, and nobody's there except for him. And at first he was being really nice. I asked where everybody was and they were like, oh, they're gonna show up later. While my friends are sitting on the couch, they start making out for like an hour straight. And this guy, who we're gonna call Jeremy, he keeps going in and out of the front door. Well, my friends asked the guy if they could go to the bathroom, and he goes, yeah, it's just around back. And at this point, they are gone for an hour. So now I'm super freaked out and I'm thinking of all the ways that I could possibly get out of this house. So I ask if I can use the bathroom. So he leads me to the backyard, which is through this alleyway, and it's pretty much fenced in by like brick buildings. So when we're back there, I'm like, where's the bathroom? And he points down to a bucket, like for part 2. Part 2 about the time that I was kidnapped. So like I said, he leads me to the backyard. When I ask where the bathroom is, he points at a bucket sitting in the middle of the yard. So I'm about to do my business and he's literally staring at me. And I'm like, can you not watch me? And he turns around, but he's still literally standing there. So at this point, I had a plan that whenever we got out of that alley, I was just going to start running. Well, that didn't go according to plan. Because as soon as we got out of the alleyway, he grabs me by my hair and drags me into the house. So right now, I'm super scared. I'm thinking, where the hell are my friends at? Well, then he says, we're going to play a game. So at this point, I'm just going along with everything because I want to make it out of this alive. So he puts a screwdriver in this lock in the front door. And then he makes me turn around and count to 15 and then turn back around. When I turned back around, he was standing there naked with a pair of leather gloves on. And at this point, I'm thinking that my friend set me up. Anyways, he punches me in the face, knocking me out cold. I woke up later to him choking me while I'm laying on the floor, like for part 3. Part 3 about the time that I was kidnapped. So like I said, he had punched me in the face, knocking me out cold, and when I woke up, he was choking me while I was laying on the floor. And he says, you're gonna do whatever I say or I'm gonna kill you. And just to prove it to you, he starts choking me in this weird way where I literally am coming in and out of consciousness. Apparently, if you choke somebody a certain way, they can literally pass out. So I said, I'll do whatever he said, and that's whenever he forced me to take off all my clothes. For the next 5 days, I had been sexually assaulted repeatedly and had no food or water. One minute he would be completely fine and then the next he would act like a psycho. He would be like, nobody loves me, I'm the spawn of Satan, I'm Satan's child. Just a lot of off the wall shit. So I started using reverse psychology on him. He said my own mother doesn't love me, and I was like, well, I love you. Fast forward, the 5th day was the worst day. He was constantly beating me. He had thrown me on the floor. I was begging for food. I still had no clothes on. You will never guess what he did next, like for part 4. Part 4 about the time that I had been kidnapped. So like I said, 5th day the worst, I'm begging for food, he's beating me constantly. So he made me sit on the couch next to him and he opens a can of cat food. I was so hungry at this point, it did not matter what it was. Well, he went into one of his episodes and he threw a space heater at my head. I woke up and I was laying on my back on the ground and I could barely open my eyes. They were like swollen shut. I could see a little bit and when I looked down, I saw that both of my hands had been broken completely. Like every single bone. Well, my parents, who had been on drugs at the time, never bothered to look for me for those few days. Well, that morning, apparently, my mom had this weird gut feeling that they needed to find me. So she told my dad, we need to find Christina. So they had been out looking for me and they saw this guy that was one of my friends. And he pretty much says, you better tell me where Christina is or I'm calling the cops on all of you. So they had told my dad that the house right next door was where I was at. So he went and knocked on the neighbor's door. And they said, well, we've been hearing screaming next door all week, like for part 5. Part 5 about the time that I was kidnapped. So like I said, my dad knocked on the door of the house that was right next to the one that I was in. They were like, oh, well, we've been hearing screaming next door all week. My dad's like, why the hell wouldn't you call the cops? And they were like, oh, because he throws a lot of parties. So while I'm laying on the floor, I hear my dad at the door. And the door's open just a crack. So that way my dad wouldn't see me, of course. Well, through the crack, my dad saw my legs laying on the floor. So my mom and dad forced their way into the house. Mind you, I'm still laying on the floor naked. And the guy who kidnapped me literally pulled out this big-ass knife. My dad grabbed this dog chain that was on the floor, wrapped it around this guy's neck, and it's like trying to choke him. Fast forward, the police pull my dad off. And as I'm in the ambulance, the cops had said that they had found another girl in the house. She was upstairs chained to the wall, and he was sexually assaulting her, and she was pregnant. But the child inside of her was dead, and if they would have found her a week later, she probably would have been dead. Because this happened back then, they weren't able to put him in jail for a long time. Like if you guys want a part 6. Part 6 about the guy who had kidnapped me. So it turns out that he had sexually assaulted multiple women. But like I said, because it was a long time ago, they weren't really able to put him in jail as long as they wanted to. So they pretty much based the case around the baby who had died in this situation. Well, during this time, he ended up getting out on bail. And he tried committing suicide. He shot himself in the stomach, but he still lived. And after that, he ended up doing a little more than 20 years. A lot of the women that he had assaulted still didn't get their justice. And I had tried looking for the girl who was there in the house, but nobody could find her. Well, I want to say in 2006, I was in a thrift store with my husband, and as I was going in, I saw him walking out. And I literally was so scared, like, just looking at him literally, like, paralyzed me. And he looked back at me like he knew exactly who I was. So I told my husband that we had to hurry up and get out of there, and after that, I never saw him again.
Do you know the dark origins behind the fairy tales we all grew up hearing? Today we're talking about the original scary story of Hansel and Gretel, which was actually a reflection of the real horrors of the Great Famine of 1315, when many people took extreme measures to survive. It's during this time that Hansel and Gretel's parents abandoned them in the woods. It was only in later editions that the mother became the evil stepmother character. Hansel takes breadcrumbs and leaves them behind, but they're eaten by birds, so they wander into the cottage built of candy where they meet the witch. The next morning, the witch locks up Hansel and makes Gretel feed him a lot of food while she gets only crab shells. Once the witch decides that Hansel is ready to be eaten, she makes Gretel open the oven to see if it's hot enough. Gretel pretends to be confused, so the witch has to demonstrate. When the witch leans into the oven, Gretel pushes her in and shuts the door. They take the witch's belongings and find their way home, but the interesting part is, after the witch is defeated, Hansel and Gretel's mother dies of unknown causes, suggesting a kind of connection between the witch and the mother. One survived by abandoning her children, and the other survived by eating others, both in some ways motivated by desperation. But which fairy tale should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series.